Life is like a mystery here in Duckburg. Race car, lasers, aeroplanes. It's a Duckworth. Might solve a mystery or rewrite history. Ducktales Season 2. Here we go. It's every day out there mating Ducktales. This is me, the Angry Anime fan. At long last, well, maybe not that long last. It actually doesn't feel like that long of a wait. Ducktales 2017's season 2 has premiered. Although technically I shouldn't say that because it's been a couple of days since it premiered. I'm just extremely late. It's mostly of a laid-back kind of episode that is focused on Louis, as well as his, well, I wouldn't say burdens, but maybe a little bit burdens, of feeling like he is not into adventure. As it turns out, the gang has adventured so much now that he is practically the guy pointing out every single cliche in every adventure. And he also begins to feel like he has no skill at all of it all. So by using his little tricky, he convinces Uncle Scrooge to have a game night. Unfortunately, Scrooge is very competitive in game night, and he takes Donald as his partner, who turns out they actually turn out to be pretty good at working together, even though all they do is yelling at each other. He's even pointed out that the fact that since Donald is so difficult to understand, and having lived with him for a long time, Scrooge is an expert of understanding what Donald is doing when he does charades. However, things do not really go as Louis is planning, because not only is the game night pretty competitive for the one who is called Scrooge McDuck, but also Gyro breaks loose, being a little bit more adorable than before, but still a little bit of the ego side, but at least a little bit tuned down than before, who has invented a shrink race and a hearing, and it turns out that in this world there is small Lilliputins like warriors all dressed in steampunk clothing that is angry at the giant people that have destroyed their Laundry City, Top Hat City, even Flush City, which turns out to be the toilet. Really. Whereas Louis pointed out, ew. And he drags Huey into this, all the while to trying to keep this secret, especially when the Gyro strings himself and then later Launchpad. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen, and the Gyro Puddings that Gyro calls them tries to shrink Scrooge next. It's during this time Louis reveals to Huey that he feels like a guile hero, the one who talks his way out of it. While Dewey is the action-packed adrenaline junkie, Webby is the brawn, and Huey is the... Wait a minute. Yeah, Dewey is the action-packed adrenaline seeker. Webby is the brawn. Huey is the brains. Louis only sees himself as the talker, or the guile hero. And he also feels like we also see a little callback to despite the fact that this episode does not reference, it actually does reference, but unlike the first season premiere, this episode is not so very heavy on the emotional side, although there are some moments there where the music actually dials down to really show us a vulnerability of it all. And that is the fact that Della is referenced this one, and Louis clearly shows signs of missing her, but also saying that adventure just feels so risky. Mom lost her life after all. So he feels like he is not cut off for adventure. But when his family is in trouble, Louis turns out to be very good at finding out pieces in people's personalities as well as how they are, to get a hand over the Gyropedians and turning everyone back up a size. Later he has a private chat with an angry Scrooge that turns out to not really be that angry, but actually tells Louis that while Louis thinks that he's a way who talks his way out of it, he's also a guy with a keen eye. As it turns out that Scrooge McDuck's catchphrase, tougher than the toughies, smarter than the smarties, even has a second line, sharper than the sharpies, which is a skill Della have, and he feels Louis has that. Louis may be sometimes a little bit con artist. He may be a little spoiled sometimes and maybe a little bit cowardly, but he has a surprisingly good eye to analyze situations. He may not be good of getting out of them because he's not that smart, but he does know people. In fact, he is the only one pointing out every single cliche of an adventure, saying they have adventured so much that it's like this, and he is completely right. So, as Scrooge put it, Louis sees the angles, and even gave the Europedians a little home on the board game now, which is ironically named Scrooge or something like that, or Scroogeopoly. That's the name. So this was an entertaining episode. It may not have been the emotional impact of it all, but it was actually surprisingly funnier than I thought about. One of those many funny jokes was the fact that when Gyro and later Launchpad was shrunk, Louis says that, "What? Gyro is a genius, and Launchpad has crashed so many times, I'm convinced he is immortal." That is actually a pretty funny line. Also, the fact that Huey shows a very strong control freak when it turns out that suing and he is not so good at it really breaks his mind. Also, Webby and Dewey has become very good friends, although they have a brief falling out during this episode when it turns out they cannot win the game together. But as Scrooge pointed out, he says the most heartwarming line of this all is the fact that you're not friends, you drive yourself mad and you can't stand each other. You're not friends, you're family. Pointing out that friends is nice, but family both fights and get along with each other. That is true friendship, familyship, which is also pretty funny on how the fact that they have some theme songs together. So all in all, I give this episode, I think, an 8.8 out of 10. And it's very welcoming that Ducktales is back. Because we have been promising a lot of things this season too. Including the return of Lena, but also the Three Caballeros is apparently going to appear in a future episode. Now that will be a sight. You can give me your thoughts if you have any.